Welcome, guys, to our second Handyman Success webinar. Thank you guys for joining us in kind of our early endeavors into doing this. I imagine a lot of folks find us from our Handyman Success podcast. So this is kind of an extension of the podcast where we're really doing these webinars every month to kind of just have some real in-depth training on specific topics, from marketing to pricing to estimating, all these different topics that we cover on our podcast and ask our guests about. We're adding this to actually kind of have more of a workshop, a real actual training that goes in more depth. So thank you guys so much for joining us here. Like Alan said, if you have any questions during the webinar here, post those in the chat. Alan's going to be leading this since he's the owner of a actual very successful handyman business in Roseville, California. So he's going to be taking the lead, and I'm just going to be making sure everyone their question get answered and all that good stuff. So truly, this is all about you guys. We want it to be interactive. So any questions, please put those in the chat, and we're happy to address them for you. So all that being said, we'll do a few introduction about myself and Alan, and then we'll jump right into it. So my name is Jason Call. I'm the owner of Handyman Marketing Pros. We do websites and SEO and online marketing, Google stuff, if you will, for handyman businesses across the US and Canada. Co-host of the Handyman Success podcast here with my good friend Alan. I do help run some coaching for his coaching group, and also a mentor and a coach to a handful of marketing company owners to help them build a better business for themselves. So that is me.
All right, and my name is Alan Lee. That's who I am, and as you can see there in the picture, that is my lovely daughter Harper. She is 5, and just in the background, you can't really see him, is my wife. We've been married for almost 11 years now, and then I have a son who's in the stroller, but he's just off the picture there. His name is Henry. He's almost 2, and it's brand new release news. We told the in-laws last night, so we are having another baby. We are having a brand new baby due May of 2024, so that'll be our third little bundle of joy. So super excited for that. Us as a family, we have a vision and a mission of being hope healers. So we want to help others succeed. We want to bring hope to people through everything that we could do. So it just so happens that what we do on a daily basis fits perfectly into that mission. So that's why something like this, comes hand in hand with our mission. We're able to bring hope to people. I absolutely love helping people in their handyman business. I started up my handyman business here in Sacramento about six-ish years ago, went full-time January 1st, 2017, and we've been rocking it ever since. Started out as a one-man band. Now we have 6 employees. One new addition is we just basically gave a promotion to our estimator to the role of general manager. And so we're kind of learning and growing into that process. So that's pretty cool. I also help handymen on a daily basis. I am a handyman business coach at Handyman Journey Business Consulting. So do that. That's kind of my day job, so that's a lot of fun. And I also co-host the Handyman Success podcast with Jason Call here. And yes, I need to update this because it says husband and father of 2 loving kids. Now I have 3. It's released. So we're going to get that updated. But that's a little bit about me. I'm stoked to be here. Stoked to bring some pricing information to you guys. Today, we're going to be talking all about pricing, and I'm really excited about it. So handyman pricing for profit is what we are talking about. Get ready to start actually making money. So pricing is very, very important for proper cash flow. We're going to jump right into it. So pricing is something that people don't really give a whole lot of thought to. And to be honest, when I first started out in this business, I really didn't give much thought to it. The whole premise of my pricing thought was I make $23 an hour at my, automotive job. So I'm going to charge $50 an hour. That sounds great, right? Like, who wouldn't want to make $50 freaking dollars an hour? So I started charging $50 an hour there, January 1st, 2017. And I thought I was making money. I'm like, yeah, I'm making $50 an hour. Like, I gave myself a raise from my previous job, right? And that's the exact problem. Is most get this wrong because they move way too fast. What I discovered through my own flaws, my own failures in this business, is that you need to do your numbers, not once, not twice, but over and over and over again. I recommend to go over your numbers at least once a month. So what I like to do is at the first of every month, go over my numbers, redo the calculations. And the book that I would recommend here is the Handyman Pricing Handbook. You can find that on Amazon. I actually wrote that book 2 years ago, and it's basically through all of my failures and my successes, what I've learned. And in that book, it details an equation to figure out what your hourly rate needs to be. And we're going to dig into that equation here on today's webinar. That equation is something that you need to go through at least once a month. At the beginning of every month, we go through our numbers. We look at the past month, see how many build hours we actually build, and how much expenses we had. And we basically do some division and some subtraction and some multiplication, and we figure out a new hourly rate for our business. Now, the first thing that you need to know is that you shouldn't charge by the hour. You should charge by the job, but everything comes down to an hourly rate. Okay. So it's very important to understand that. And it really comes down to an hourly rate, not so much of worked hours, but build hours. And we're going to talk about the difference between worked hours and build hours today on the webinar. It's very important to distinguish those two things because you probably work 8, maybe 10, maybe even 12 hours a day. But the actual build hours are hours that you're actually like efficiently billing for. You're efficiently getting income, labor, money for. And most of the time, most handymen are not 100% efficient. They're more like 80% efficient. We're going to dig into that here in a little bit. But I wanted to stop before I go to the next slide and definitely say, if you have any questions at all during this whole webinar, drop them in the chat section and Jason will like throw a hand up or something like that, or cut me off. Because this is all about you guys. We want to hear your questions. I want to answer them. Those of you that are tuning into this webinar live, you get the awesomeness of actually asking us questions. So take advantage of that. You're here, and there's no such thing as a stupid question. Well, the only stupid question is the question not asked, right? So yeah, all right, let's move on to the next one here. So the first thing we've got to cover in pricing, before we get to all that mumbo jumbo equation stuff, it's very important, but you got to figure out your mindset. So mindset is huge, not just in pricing, and not just in business, but in life. Pricing or mindset is so huge, and it's something that you're going to struggle with more than anything else in your life. Mindset is one of those things that you know what the right answer is, you know what you need to do, but your mindset is like stuck, like the gears are just stuck, right? You can't move past it because your mindset hasn't evolved yet. So for pricing, you need to understand that you are valuable. Your skills are valuable. What you know is valuable. And people are calling you because you have something that they need. Okay? People will pay for the value that they perceive in you. And what you do, or what do you stand for, and how can those be portrayed more, or how can those core values be portrayed more, basically to show more value? That's really at the end of the day what you need to get across. So you need to understand that you are valuable. What you are doing is valuable, and the knowledge that you have is valuable. It's more valuable than when you worked for someone before, because you were basically just working for a paycheck. Right now, it's only you out at the house working on someone's property. So when something goes wrong, or something's a little bit, like, I don't know about this, it's up to you to figure that out. And that's valuable, right? That costs money, and people need to pay for that. People will understand that value because they know that you have something that they don't. You have a mindset that they don't have. You have the ability to dissect a situation and figure out problems the way that they don't have. So that's probably the first thing that we need to know.
So, Alan, if I'm just to kind of recap why this is important is because I know a lot of people don't charge enough. That's the main problem, is they don't charge enough. Mm-hmm. And a big part of not charging enough is that they have not like really looked at the mindset and acknowledged like that their skills are super valuable, and they can charge X number of dollars that they, maybe right now think that they can't charge that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely. Exactly. I think people are, they're thinking about their hourly wage based on an employee hourly wage, which is completely different. And we're going to dig into that on many different aspects. Specifically, the expenses make it wildly different. But a huge aspect that also makes it different is just your knowledge base that you have to have, and your diagnosis skills, because it's only you. You can't go to your boss and ask him, hey, how do I do this? It's up to you. You're the boss, So that's value for sure. Okay, so next we're going to hop into the pricing equation. This is where we're going to get down into the nitty gritty. Was there any questions thus far, Jason, before we kind of
Nope.
shift into that? Okay.
Nope. And all this is covered in super detail in your handbook.
Yeah.
So guys, I get nothing for recommending that. Like Alan barely makes any money on it. Bezos makes most of the money. It's like 20
That's
bucks.
true, actually.
It's 20 bucks. And I just from my third person perspective here of seeing comments, it's very insightful to pick up that book, 20 bucks, gives you all the equations, all this stuff. So, it's basically just a very in-depth, like, paper book of what Alan's going to be covering here for you.
Right, right. The Handyman pricing handbook for sure. Okay, we're going to dig into the pricing equation. So strap on your seatbelts, really pull out a piece of paper and write this stuff down, or take a screenshot of this. I would highly recommend you write it down, actually, because if you take a screenshot, you're probably never going to look at it on your phone. I'm serious, guys. This is what you need to do. Okay. Most people struggle with this. This is something that I struggled with for years. And to be honest, I still struggle with at times because it's tricky, right? And you need to do it. You need to apply yourself, because if you want to find profit like a business should, you have to do this stuff. Okay. So we're going to break it down very simply. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to first figure out what all of your business expenses are. And for that, we're going to go to the next slide. We're going to come back to this one. Okay, so you need to, on this sheet here, we basically have a sheet that helps you figure out what all of your expenses are, your personal expenses and your business expenses. So you have your personal expenses on one side, your business expenses on the other. And you need to write out everything, right? If you're a sole proprietor, then this is what you need to figure out. So your mortgage, how much are you paying that per month? How much your groceries, your gas, your electric, your heat, your health insurance, your garbage, your phone. This is how much you need to pay yourself per month, basically, is what we're getting at, right? So in this equation here, the total that the business would need to pay the person, you, would be $2,700 a month, right? Let's say 3,000, right? Your business expenses are expenses that your business actually has overhead in your business that need to be covered by your hourly rate. And you need to write that out. How much does the business phone cost? What's your, truck registration, your general liability insurance, your advertising? I just realized I misspelled advertising. This is right out of the book too, so that means the book has a typo. How much do you pay for taxes? How much is a licensing fee? How much goes into retirement? Giving, truck gas, tax preparation. And then as your business grows, there's a whole lot of expenses that get piled into this, right? This is kind of a sole proprietor stuff. I'm an LLC. I actually have employees now. So basically, under my business expenses, there's one line item for me. And that would be, owner's draw or owner's compensation. That's what I get paid. But then there's a bunch of other, business expenses like workers' comp and general liability and gas and, registration and even windshield wipers, tools, materials, everything like that, right? Needs to go into this. So once you figure out what your business expenses are, so in this equation, just to give you an idea for this one here, that you're seeing on paper is going to be a little bit different than our actual equation. So that might make it a little bit different, whatever. But you total the business expenses and you total the personal and you come up with the total. Okay. So go back to our pricing equation. You're going to take that business expense. Let's just say it's $5,000. You're going to add 20% onto that $5,000. So you're going to take the $5,000 and multiply it by 0.2. Okay. And then that's going to give you $1,000. You add that. So you add the 20% to the business expenses, and that gets you your break-even number, which is $6,000. Okay. Then you take that break-even number of $6,000 and you add another 20% to that. So you take that $6,000, you multiply it by 0.2 again, it gets you $1,200. And you add $1,200 to 6,000, that gets you $7,200. That's what I call your profit benchmark number. Okay. You take that profit benchmark number and you divide it by the number of billable hours in a month. Okay. Now this is where it gets a little interesting, right? And that basically equals your hourly rate. Now, the way that you figure out what your billable hours per month is really different for every company, every organization, every person. Is in any given month, right? There is 40 working hours in a week, Monday through Friday, 8 hours a day. That's 40 hours. Multiply that by 4, that's 160 hours. So on any given 20-hour working month, you have 160 working hours. Now, no one is 100% efficient. most of the time we are more like 80% efficient because we got to go to Home Depot, you got to eat lunch, you got to go to the bathroom, you got to go get tools out of the truck, whatever it is. So if you, for any 8-hour day that you're out working, you're really only billing about 6 hours, maybe, maybe even 5, depending on your profitability and your efficiency. So let's just say your profitability is 80%. So your 80% efficiency rule out of 20 working days, that equals 160 working hours in a month. Multiply that by 0.8, that's 80%, and you get 128 billable hours in a month. So in any given month, you only actually have 128 billable hours in that month. And that's again a 20 working day month. So some months have 21 working days, some months have 22, some months have 20. I just go with the lowest because it basically covers everything at that point. So you have 128 billable hours in a month. Now it's important to always look at these billable hours every single month, because you may figure out what your hourly rate is, but then let's say for the month of August, you thought you were going to bill 128 billable hours, but you only billed 100. You only billed 100 billable hours. So that means you didn't bring in as much money as you needed to. Well, when you do your equation for September, you're now, instead of going to dividing it by 128 billable hours, you're going to divide it by 100 billable hours. And that's going to raise your hourly rate to compensate for your lack of efficiency. And then as you go, hopefully you will get more efficient and you'll have more billed hours in that month. In the months coming, you'll be able to lower your hourly rate at that point. So you take your profit benchmark, which in this equation is $7,200. You divide it by your billed hours. And we found the billed hours at 80% efficiency was 128 billable hours. And that gets you $56.25. So really at the end of the day, in this equation, if your expenses are $5,000, you need to be charging at least $56.25. I would say if you have an employee or 2 or 3 or whatever, your expenses are going to be way more than $5,000 a month. Our expenses are definitely, way up there in, the 5-digit numbers. So you need to definitely change this equation up for your particular business, starting with your business expenses. That's the first thing. You enter your business expenses, you're going to figure out what your hourly rate needs to be. The only other thing that you need to figure out is how efficient you are. So as you get more people, right? So if you have 2 guys that are working 8 hours a day, for a whole month, instead of 128 billable hours, that's going to be 128 times 2, which, let me get my calculator out because I'm not good at math. That's 256 billable hours. So you could see how adding more employees will actually lower your hourly rate as long as your expenses don't hike up too high. So it's important to know how many billable hours you have in any given month so that you can plug it into this equation correctly and actually do the work as necessary. So I want to stop right here and again say, if you guys have any questions at all, drop them in the chat section, because more often than not, if you have a question, it's more than likely that someone else has that same exact question. They're just too scared or nervous to ask it. So I would ask you to, ask the question, right? Be brave, because I definitely want to hear your questions and I definitely want to answer it, because I want to make sure you guys are understanding, understanding this stuff I'm giving you. Does it make sense? Does anything come to your mind, Jason, as far as questions go?
Yeah, so like practically, like someone's salary is an expense. Like your pay as the owner of the business, so assuming you're starting out solo owner operator, that's an expense. So if I want to pay myself $5,000 a month, then that's an expense. And then if my business expenses on top of my pay, which of course labor is going to be the biggest expense in most cases, unless you're buying a ton of materials, which, that's kind of a different ballgame. But say my business expenses for my truck payment, insurance, all that stuff is $2,000. My personal, what I need to make is $5,000 a month. So, 5,000 plus 2,000, that'd be that your base business expenses would be 7,000.
Correct. Yes. Yeah,
And
that's a very good factor.
And of course, this whole pricing equation is built so that you're not just paying yourself $5,000. You're not shooting for that. Like, you're in business for freedom of time and freedom of finance. Like, we need, as businesses, need to make a profit, or else you just got to really enjoy working way harder than everybody else for the same amount of money for the
Yeah.
paycheck. So with this, applying that in the profit equation, the pricing equation, it's building in the fact that you need to make above and beyond what you're paying yourself as
Yeah.
profit.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, I've talked to many people and they say that they have cash flow issues. I said, well, how much do you bring in a month? And they tell me, X number, and it's like less than what they want to be actually making. And it's like, well, there's your problem right there. Like you're definitely not making enough to even cover your salary or another guy. So,
But
yes, yeah,
one
go ahead.
question too that I bet some people are thinking, where does the why what can you explain a little bit about the plus 20% on the business expenses and the break even?
Mhm. So there's really not like a whole lot of science behind that. It's really just what I found has worked, right? And I think my whole train of thought might be based on that 80% efficiency rule because, 80 plus 20 is 100, right? So uh, from what I found is if you take your business expenses and add 20%, you're usually around that on any given month. Like that's kind of your break even number because there's always those unnoticed business expenses that happen, right? Or that rabbit hole we get caught going down on Amazon and we just buy a whole lot of crap that we don't need. Or when we're in Home Depot and we see all the Milwaukee tools on sale, right? There's a lot like that's just what I found as far as the 20%. And then for
Like a
profit as
cushion.
well. What was that?
It's a nice realistic cushion for the fact
Yeah.
that we're always going to spend more than what we think. And, we're realistic. If we don't have this, we're going to be making less than what we think we're making. So it kind of
Right.
adds this cushion, like this realistic cushion to it.
Right. It's shooting high is really just what it
Yeah.
is. And same with the profit. It's like let's just aim for that 20%. And you'll probably end up somewhere around, maybe 7 to 12, but it's a good kind of thing to shoot for because business is tricky. There's always unknown things that happen, right? There's always those jobs. And I think it also covers the jobs that like we do and then something goes wrong with it. So we have to go warranty it or whatever it is, right? It covers a lot of those like unforeseen circumstances that happen in life, or the truck breaks down, unknown or whatever, and you got to get it fixed. So kind of just has a little bit more cash baked into that price to help you cover those expenses. Good question. All right. So yeah, that's a little bit about the pricing equation. Again, if you guys have any questions at all, drop them in the chat. Or if you're watching this video at a later date, go ahead and just drop your questions in the comment section here on YouTube, and we will definitely get back with you. We monitor those quite often. So okay, so this is basically just kind of a formula as far as figuring out what your hourly rate needs to be. This is kind of the same numbers, right? You got your cost, 600 or $6,000, and you multiply that by 0.2. So you mark that up for profit, you get your $7,200, and you take that $7,200 and so step two would be you take that $7,200, divide it by 128 billable hours in a month, and you get your hourly rate of 56.25 hours. So the next thing we're going to talk about here is different ways to price. One way to price, and I actually first heard about this from Joseph Millis. He forwarded the Handyman Pricing Handbook for me, and he had some really good insights. If you don't know who Joseph is, Joseph runs a fantastic YouTube channel all about reviewing tools and things like that. You could check that out. It's called Millis Construction on YouTube. Fantastic guy. But the way that he prices is he prices quarter day, half day, and full day. So he has basically three rates, right? So if someone calls in for something small, that's just going to be an hour or 2 hours. He charges the quarter day rate, which is not on here, but basically you would take your hourly rate, multiply it by 2, and you'd figure that out. And then he has a half day rate. So this is anything that is above a quarter day, but below a half day. So, if it's going to take 2.5 hours, he charges a half day rate. Even though it's only going to take him 2.5 hours, he charges 4 hours for that job, a half day rate. If it's going to take him 3 hours, he charges a half day rate. If it's going to take him 4 hours, he charges a half day rate. Because there's always that admin cost that's included in business. Is like once you get done with the job, you're not done with the job. You actually have to estimate you have to invoice the job, you have to collect the payment, you have to take the payment down to the bank, you have to deposit it, all this and that, right? So that's his thought behind it, right? And it's really a simple way of doing that. So instead of, I definitely, like I said before, don't recommend that I recommend for people not to charge hourly, but charge by the job. This is kind of another thought as far as charging, right? You can charge by the day. So quarter day, half day, or full day. So if it's going to take 3 hours, he charges a half a day, 225 in this equation. If it's going to take a full day, so anything greater than 4 hours but less than 8 hours, or right at 8 hours, he charges a full day rate, which is 450. So it has a lot of more of that cushion built into it. It's not the way that we charge. We don't charge like that. We charge by the job, but it's definitely a doable way of charging. I think the cool thing about this is there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to do something. Just because, it's the way that I do it doesn't mean that it's necessarily the only way to do it. Like there's always different things that you can do. Yeah, Jason.
So the hourly rate there, 56.25. I know you built this quite a many years ago. So that's I think in today's market, of course, it depends on where someone's at, what their expenses are, but that's very much on the low end, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think we've talked about this quite often. Like I think that any respectable handyman, like we're creating a different type of handyman, right? Like 6 years ago, handymen were chucks in a truck, and there's still chucks in a truck running around today. But we're creating like a different type of handyman. You call it an honest handyman, of someone who's honest, works with integrity, stands behind their work, has clean uniforms, has a nice truck. If you are a respectable, honest handyman, you should probably be at least charging $100 an hour. Obviously there's different demographics and different economy all around the U.S., but I think by and large, $100 is probably pretty reasonable. 56.25 is very low. And yes, you are spot on. I just chose a number out of thin air for this equation.
Yeah. And so just to set some benchmarks, just for everyone watching this, that's certainly you'll definitely be quite a bit above 56 when you do this math yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Anthony says I thought that was low also. Yeah. So the pricing, like even for like newer businesses, when we work with someone new and they're asking about pricing, like on the low end nowadays, like you should got to be at least like 75, and that's pretty dang low still.
Mm-hmm.
So like Alan said, anyone with insurance, license, quality work, just maybe wears booties in the house, the nice great customer experience, at least $100 an hour is certainly mainstay nowadays. For perspective, Alan, what hourly rate do you charge now? And of course, understanding that you don't give the hourly rate to the customer, but that's how you price jobs.
Right. Yeah. So we charge $198 an hour. And that took a lot of time to get to that point, but our numbers show that we should be charging that. But we had a mindset block of like, oh, we can't charge 198 because it's, we'll lose customers, right? But yeah, we charge $198 an hour and we stay busy with that. So that's just kind of some potential of what you could do. Really, the sky's the limit. You just have to find the correct clients. And that's kind of a whole nother webinar, which we'll be doing a webinar down the road about marketing and, sales and how to, collect those type of people. But that's a really good point.
Yeah, it all ties together. Anthony asked a question. Do you guys have a minimum to come out?
Yeah, so Anthony, that's a great question. So our minimum, and again, we don't, when I'm speaking hourly to you, we don't speak hourly to the client. So I'll tell you right now, we have a 2-hour minimum to come out, or that's what we used to have. Right now, we'll actually go out for 1 hour, and I'll explain why. So we just tell people, it's $396 is our minimum. That's 2 hours, but $396. They don't need to know how many hours that covers. And we still do that for what we call our A tech. We have two types of technician right now. We have an A tech and we have a C tech. And again, this is kind of getting into a different webinar, but we'll dive down this rabbit hole because it's fun. I really enjoy this stuff. And so we have an A tech and a C tech. The A tech is someone who can do virtually anything, right? Someone that we would not hesitate sending out on, running a new wire or, replacing drywall or whatever it is. And then we have a C tech. So if you think of it, A, B, C tech, right? So a C tech is kind of an entry-level technician, someone who maybe can do a little bit of drywall, but by and large, they just do like ceiling fans, light fixtures, kitchen faucets, the easy stuff, right? But they're learning to get to a C tech position or to get to an A tech position. So the A techs are obviously incentivized. And again, We have a whole bunch of different webinar ideas here because that's a whole different webinar. We have the A-Tech on different incentivization. So based on how many build hours he bills in any given week, he makes some pretty good money. The C-Tech is incentivized, but on a much lower scale because he's not doing as intricate or detailed work. So basically the C-Tech is kind of on a lower pay scale. So we can afford to send him out for a 1 hour minimum. So people call up for, which is really great now because for a long time we turned away all these small jobs. People would call in and say, I just have one kitchen faucet, can you help me out? Like, unfortunately, we can't. We have a 396 minimum, and that doesn't cover it, right? And they wouldn't have anything else. But now we can do that, which is really great. So getting that C-Tech has helped in a lot of different manners because it's helped us be able to take those smaller one-off jobs and actually sometimes those turn into bigger jobs. So we're just getting that client in the door and helping them out turns into more work down the road, which has been fantastic. So our hourly or our minimum is $396 for our A-Tech and $198 for our C-Tech. So good question.
And he had one follow-up question. I know this is kind of getting into a whole other topic, but benefits of being live is we can kind of go down a rabbit hole. So understanding that we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on compensation for different technicians and structure of that. Anthony asked, do you pay them hourly or percentage or combination of both?
Yeah, that's great. And I just want to put it out there too, just while we're kind of digging into this rabbit hole, is you can set up a free consultation call with me on handymanjourney.com. I'd love to talk with you and hear a little bit about your business and how we can help. Because we also have a coaching program where we dig into this stuff pretty constantly. We have bi-monthly group coaching calls and things like that I would love to talk with you about. But to get back on it. So basically we pay our technicians hourly, but then they get a bonus commission based on how many build hours they bill. And that's kind of digging into the weeds a little bit, but basically you have 40 clocked hours per week. And based on how many build hours they actually bill, so say they get an estimate or a work order that has 8 hours on it, if they do that 8 hours worth of work in 6 hours, they still get credit for 8 hours of build hours that week. And it's basically a tiered level. So if they bill 1 to 5 build hours in a week, they get an extra $1 an hour. If they bill 5.1 hours to 10 hours per week, they get an extra $3 an hour. And so far up, right? Our highest tier is they get an extra $15 an hour. So the reason why we have it set up that way is because when we make more money, we want them to make more money. It helps with employee satisfaction and retention. And it also gives them some incentivization to not only work quicker, but work better. Because obviously if they get a comeback, if they do something wrong, they have to go out and fix that job, and they don't get any extra billable hours for that. So they're basically kind of eating their own commission at that point. So it encourages them. And then also if they finish up on any given day, if they finish all the work like by lunch, they are incentivized to, rather than go home, they could call tomorrow's job and see if they can bump them up and get them done today, right? Which allows us to fit more people into that schedule and keep the ball rolling. So that incentivization really helps. Yeah.
Cool.
Great
Thanks,
question, though. I love that stuff. Love it. Any other ones?
That's what we got for now, man. Yeah,
Okay.
anyone else that's got any questions as we're going through here, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll go down some rabbit holes.
We're digging in the weeds for all the people that are here live. This is fantastic. I love it. So, like I said, there are different styles of pricing, right? You have a half day, full day rate, which quarter day, half day, full day. You could charge by the hour. You could charge by the job. You could charge by the hour. There was one time in our business where we experimented with charging by the hour. We're like, well, I wonder what would happen, because at least if we're working, and my thought was, if we're working 8 hours in a day, at least we'll get 8 hours worth of like build time, and we'll actually make 8 hours worth of income. That didn't happen, because here's what happens, right? You tell someone, and this was a true story. You tell someone, we're going to come out for a 2 hour minimum, right? And they needed a kitchen faucet and a light fixture replaced. So we go out there, we do that, and we're all done with the job. And she's like, okay, what's the bill? And we're like, oh, it's the, I forget what our rate was at the time, maybe $90 an hour. So 180, right? That's 2 hours. And she's like, well, you've only been here for 2 hours and 50 minutes, or an hour and 50 minutes. And we're like, okay. And she's like, yeah, there's on that really tall chandelier, there's some dust on the top of that, on the top of the light bulbs, you know, if you guys bring your ladder and I'll get you a dust cloth and you can dust that until your time's up. And so what happens is they keep you there working until, you know, the second that that 2 hours is up. And then you have to collect a payment, you have to clean up all your tools, you have to, you know, get ready for, so at the end of the day, you're there for 2.5 hours, but you're only getting paid for 2 hours worth of work. So that's one issue with charging by the hour. The other issue is you don't get charged for your, or you don't get paid for your knowledge or your wisdom. So when you first start out, say you're going to charge $50 an hour, right? And you tell them $50 an hour. And as long as it takes me, that's what you pay. So it takes you 2 hours to do a ceiling fan. Okay. And you get paid $100 for that ceiling fan. Well, 2 years go by, that same client hires you for another ceiling fan. And you're like, okay, $50 an hour. But now you've gotten quicker, where you can now do that same ceiling fan in an hour instead of 2 hours. Well, you're only getting paid $50 for that same ceiling fan now, where when you were there prior, you got paid $100 for that same ceiling fan. So you're actually losing money. You're getting a pay decrease because of your efficiency, whereas it should be the opposite. Charging by the job allows you to get paid for your efficiency. Is that I'm going to charge you 2 hours for this job. Like, you're obviously not telling the client this. I'm going to charge 2 hours for this job, and I know I could bang it out in an hour. And that is efficiency. And that's getting paid for your knowledge and your wisdom. And that's really how things should work. Obviously, you don't want to rip people off. You want to charge people the correct amount, but you should also charge people for the knowledge and the wisdom that you've learned over the years. It makes me think of this one story, kind of a parable, I guess, in a sense, which I don't really know it all that well, so I'm going to kind of butcher it, I'm sure. But there's like some siren going off at some nuclear place out in China, and they're trying to, get this siren to go off and this and that. And they finally call this dude, and he comes out there and he just flips one switch and the siren goes off. And they're like, okay, thank you. And he hands them a bill for like $10,000. And they're like, you were out here for like a minute and you just flipped a switch. You're ridiculous. And so he's like, okay. So he took it back. He changed up the invoice and he said, okay, $1 for flipping the switch and $9,999 for the knowledge to know which switch to flip, right? And that's, at the end of the day, that's what we need to get paid for, is the knowledge of knowing which switch to flip, right? That's what we always tell people when we're talking about materials too, is like, we would rather bring our own materials unless it's something like a faucet or a fan where you want it to look the way it looks, because we have the knowledge to get the correct material and get it the first time, right? So I think that you should definitely get paid for that. All right. This is fun, guys. Okay, so the next thing that you want to think about as far as pricing goes, and again, this is all in the Handyman Pricing Handbook, is you have demographics. Demographics are huge when you're establishing your pricing and figuring that out. Can your area afford what you need to charge? If it can't, you need to think about how to increase your value or lower your expenses. So if your particular community cannot take the burden of what you're going to be charging or what you need to charge for your services, you need to figure out how to lower your expenses or increase your value, or maybe go outside of that city and look for maybe a more higher end area or things like that. But by and large, most cities can afford a lot more than you think. I was thinking about this the other day. In any given city, think about how much money is transferred just by hand every single day. Like, that's the economy, right? You have contractors, you have service workers, you have plumbers, you have city and state employees. Like, there's so much money being transferred every single day. And it's money that you can either be involved in or not involved in. So you kind of need to make that choice for yourself. The next thing you need to consider when you're trying to establish your pricing is competition. Competition can be a good thing, right? What are your competitors charging? What are they offering to their clients? Figure out how to bring more value to your clients than them. And oftentimes that is through getting personal. So one thing I recommend when you're first starting out, or maybe you've been in business for a while, just call your competitors and act like you need something done. We did this a few years back. We had our CSR, our secretary, create a list of, I think at that point we were actually looking at plumbers, because we wanted to learn how many of them were charging a service fee, what their minimums were. We wanted to kind of do some market research. So we had her create a list of plumbers in the area, and she called them up asking for a specific service, and she got all this info from them. And it was really valuable because we got to learn what they're charging, what their hourly rate is. Do they come out for $50 for the first hour and then they charge $1,000 an hour, or what does that look like, right? And it really can give you some good insight as far as what you should be charging. Not that you should charge what everyone else is charging. You should charge what your numbers say you need to charge. Because more than often, the people around you, your competition, are not charging enough either, and they're probably struggling with cash flow. So you need to watch that as well. But getting personal is huge. That's the way that you really, clients get to trust you is getting personal with them. A few things that I tell my employees, right? Like when you walk in and you see they have a dog, right? Ask about the dog, get on your knee and pet the dog, right? Or if you get in there and you see that they have a whole bunch of World War II memorabilia, ask them about that. And we had one great conversation with a gal who her dad was in World War II, and just really great conversation. And you really create some good, some good value with the client that way.
Yeah, we just interviewed a guy on our podcast that's releasing later this year, and he carries a couple dog treats in his pocket whenever he walks into someone's house, and it's just a nice personal touch.
Yep.
And it speaks to, like Alan mentioned earlier, all these things work together: the customer experience, your marketing, your pricing, all these things work together to be able to command a premium price.
Yep, that's true. And then also, side note, we do have Handyman Success podcast. It releases the first of every month on this YouTube channel, as well as Spotify and all those other resources. So check that out. Okay. And then getting into more of the pricing, talking about additional charges, right? These are things that we charge for on the estimates. On every estimate, we charge a mileage charge. This is our miles to basically go from our shop or your home, whatever you want to do, to the client's home, and times 2, right? Because you're going there and back. So, at the end of the day, we have a mileage charge. I think it's $2.52 a mile. I need to up that because I haven't upped it in probably a year and a half. So it definitely needs to go up because, gas prices have gone up pretty drastically here in California, as well as insurance. So that's just a charge to help cover insurance, help cover, gasoline and wear and tear and things like that. Another additional charge is we charge a miscellaneous materials charge on every single estimate. We typically charge a fee of $10 to $15, and this covers miscellaneous supplies, right? Like caulking and nails and staples and, all that little stuff that you don't think you use. I have a little example back about 2 years into my business. I had some independent contractors, and there was one guy that he always only ever had materials, labor. He only ever charged labor. And I'm like, do you never use materials? He's like, oh, I do, but just a little bit of caulking or a few screws or a few nails here, but it's nothing major. And I'm like, well, a few nails here and a few nails there, that soon adds up to a whole box. And who's paying for that whole box? Me, right? If you don't charge the customer for that, that's coming out of your pocket. And then another additional charge that we put on estimates that require it is a debris haul off and disposal fee. So, you think about how long it will take you to actually dump that and the associated fees to dump that as well. So if someone has a toilet, right, how long is that going to take you to unload that from your truck? And also, what are the associated fees going to be with that? So this charge doesn't have to be anything drastic, but you do want to at least cover your dump charges when you go to the dump, right? And this is how you do that, through charging a little bit amount on every estimate that you're hauling something away on is debris haul off and disposal fee.
I like the mileage charge. I think that's something that everyone should be taking account, even if it's not an additional charge, just baked into the estimate, especially with gas prices. Do you think, Alan, like some range between like $2 and $3 per mile is pretty reasonable for that?
Yeah, I would say. Mine is currently multiplied by 2 already, so it's 152. So that means it's one something per mile, right? And then we multiplied it by 2 for the trip there and back. So I would say just per mile, and then multiply that by 2, probably $2 to $3 would be good. I think we need to up ours, probably somewhere in not the mid 2s, but maybe like a quarter, like 2 and a quarter would probably be somewhere I would think would be good. you know?
Yeah, and it's good to look at, especially if you're in a more rural area. Anthony mentions he tries to stay within 45-minute drive. There's one guy that we work with, and he lives in very rural Missouri, and he'll drive, most of his jobs are at least 30 minutes to sometimes up to an hour and a half, 2 hours. And so
Yeah.
he had to come up with his more popular towns, like how many miles away they are, and just tell people like, hey, we have a $75, this is a trip charge because I live, here and you're an hour and a half away and we live in the middle of nowhere. So that's not too far technically because you're on highways, like just lonely highways. But it's something that he had to figure out by the mileage because he was bleeding. He was just bleeding profits because of the amount of time he was spending driving and not being paid for that, not accounting for his fuel, his vehicle, for all those miles. He was just charging for his hourly, his rate, right? His by the job, but was leaving out 1 to 2 hours every day because he was on the road guzzling gas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so we have had a few customers balk at this mileage charge, but really it doesn't happen very often. And it's funny because the people that balk at it are very close, like they're within a mile, right? So the charge is like $3, and they're like, balking at this and be like, why are you charging me $3? It's like, but yesterday we just had one, or not yesterday, 2 days ago, we helped out a friend who's a realtor, and we ended up going out to Elk Grove, and it was an hour drive, and it was an $86 mileage charge, which I was like, holy cow, that's a lot. And the client didn't think anything of it. Like they were perfectly fine with it. So I think this really digs into like sales and marketing and stuff like that, is figuring out, finding your ideal client, because the people who balk at this kind of stuff, they don't respect the type of value you bring. And even you driving to their job is valuable, right? And so people that understand that, I think by and large won't have a problem with that, because they understand that the world doesn't revolve around them, and they understand that there's prices associated with running a business. To get, like, we're not a type of business that someone brings something to us and then we fix it at our location and then they come and get it and take it back home. Like we literally load up all of our tools and ourselves and like haul that to the client's house and then do their work, and sometimes haul things away from their house that they don't want anymore, right? Like toilets and stuff. So finding your ideal client is someone that will not balk at that mileage charge for sure.
We got a couple questions, Alan. You kind of already answered one. Ivan asked, how do customers generally react to the mileage charge, which you already touched on that. And one thing I'd emphasize too is Alan decides to have that as an item on his invoices and his estimates.
Mm-hmm.
You could also just include that into your total estimate where it's not even a breakout charge.
Mm-hmm.
So there's multiple ways to do it, and how Alan does it, it's broken out. So everyone's different, but Ivan, I think Alan pretty much answered that question as far as how customers react.
Yeah.
Edmundo, thanks us for the call. Thanks for being here, man. So what are your views on charging for on-site estimates?
This is a great question, Edmundo. I appreciate it. So I'm actually doing a 100-day video challenge right now on YouTube. So for the next 100 days, I'm creating a YouTube video basically talking about what I've learned through business, what I failed on. And today is day 19. And I actually talked about exactly that on today's video. So I'm going to plug that. Check that out on my YouTube channel, day 19. I think it's called something like Handyman Sells $400,000 over the phone, or $500,000, something like that. But it comes down to the Handyman Sales Handbook, which is another one of our books that we created. You can get it on Amazon. And we have a whole sales script that we walk people through. And again, this is jumping into a completely different sales. This is jumping into a completely different webinar that we will do down the road. But this sales script walks you through that. And we actually charge people for on-site estimates. We charge what we call it is a $100 consult fee. And it's very important to, check that video out, get the book, Handyman Sales Handbook, because it will definitely tell you how to do that appropriately, right? Some people will be like, yeah, I can do an estimate. It's $100 for an estimate. I personally don't do it that way. We say we give free estimates. But if you want us to come out and actually take a look at the work, it'll be a $100 consult fee. And the difference between those is when people call us, we give them an estimate over the phone. That's your free estimate. If you want us to come out even further and to, you know, check on things, measure things, blah, 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 then we can definitely do a $100 consult fee that gets credited towards the job if we decide to work together. So at the end of the day, it's kind of a way of weeding people out. And if you watch the video, I think I explained it really well in that video of if someone is willing and ready to work for you, if they love your price and this and that, and they love your value and they're ready to work for you, they're not going to balk at a $100 consult fee that gets credited toward the job, because they're like, yeah, I'm going to pay for the work anyways. So what's $100 right now? It's just a down payment. If someone's just looking for a price and they're a tire kicker, they're not going to want to pay the $100 consult fee. And I would rather, you know, get that person off my list while we're on the phone, rather than me going out and doing a little tap dance for them and then finding out that they don't want to work for me. I've wasted my time and I've wasted their time. So that's kind of my answer to the question. Really good question, but definitely check out Handyman Sales Handbook and the YouTube channel, Day 19.
And I just linked that video in the chat, and one of the comments, I kind of laughed. It says, man, this video is all prime rib. It's very beefy, lots of information on this exact topic, Edmundo. So definitely check that out. One other question that came up here, Alan, and this is from Nick. How do you talk to your customers about pricing? And secondary question to that is, how do you estimate a small job and justify two trips, one to see it and another if they say yes to the bid? So I know you kind of touched on that, but I guess how would you answer, like, how do you talk to your customer about pricing? Because this kind of, in my mind, kind of overlaps a little bit with sales as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the biggest thing is you have to have a set mindset on pricing in order to deliver that information well. If you're not sure of your pricing, you're going to be like, we charge, you know, like you're going to be all scared, right? But if you know your numbers, and the assuredness really comes from running your numbers. So doing this equation that's found in the Handyman Pricing Handbook is really where that you know, strength comes from. Is once you do that, you have that to stand behind. It's like, hey, if I don't charge this, I'm literally taking a hot dog out of my son's mouth. And I don't want to do that, right? My son needs to eat, right? He needs to grow. So if I don't charge this, then I'm not going to feed my kids. And that sucks, right? Why am I even in this? So at the end of the day, it doesn't even really come down to a conversation very much. I mean, I remember when I first started out, one lady grilled me on my prices. Like, she's like, why are you charging this? And she wanted to know every little aspect. And so I had sat down with her and I walked her through this whole pricing equation. I'm like, this is why I charge what I charge. And at the end of the day, she was like, wow. But usually it doesn't get that big into the weeds with clients. But I think at the end of the day, just figure out what your hourly rate needs to be, figure out a price list. So here on the next slide, if we can get to it here, we're going to talk about a price list. And I'm going to give you guys a price list that will really help you, you know, be able to deliver this stuff to your clients in a very easy manner. So when they call up, they say they need this, they need this, they need this. You do a little bit of equation on your pencil and you're like, okay, this is the charge. There's no questions about it. Like, there's no haggling. There's nothing. This is what it's going to cost you. And if they don't want to go with you, if they want to question your prices, that's fine. There's another handyman out there that will work for you. There's someone out there that will charge what you want to charge. Because at the end of the day, you know, there's two things, right? Clients want to know when you can do the work and what you can do it for, right? And if they don't like those two things, if they don't like how quick you can get to it, or they don't like your price, they're going to find a handyman that can do it in the time that they need it done and the price that they want it done for. And that's okay. Not everyone is your ideal client. You just have to be okay with that. All right. Great question. Great question. So we're going to hop into something now that we kind of already talked about, so I won't dive too far into it. Minimum charges. It is recommended to create a minimum charge of 1 to 2 hours. It's based on you, based on your expenses. Most of the time, it's not worth it to send a full-fledged technician out to a house for less than 2 hours, because you actually do the work. You got to clean up. You got to write the invoice. You got to drive to the job. You're there for about 2 hours anyways, you know, so that's usually the thought behind the minimum charge. And then the pricing guide. This is fantastic. And again, it has my numbers plugged into it. So you take it, plug your own numbers into it, create one yourself. What we do for the pricing guide is we sat down with our technician and we said, okay, how long does it take you to replace a toilet? How long does it take you to install a faucet? Blah, blah, blah. And then we just basically put in our metrics of how much we charge per hour, and bam, it populates a price. Our estimator has that on the wall next to his desk, and he refers to that very constantly. So we'll go to that right now here. Okay, so this is it here. It's probably kind of small. So take a screenshot, whatever. But basically it's a pretty simple list of everything that we do. This is only one little snapshot of it. It's quite a bit bigger than this. So you have the type of job, the details, right? Caulking, R&R, the R&R, the caulking around the kitchen sink, which stands for remove and replace. That's automotive terms. And the hours for that, we sell it for 3/4 of an hour. So our rates for that would be $148.50, right? And so on. Dryer vent cleaning, we have a flat price for that. So we don't necessarily charge that by the hours in a sense. We charge that flat rate. So single story, $225, 2-story vents through the roof, $275. Gutter cleaning, 1,200 square feet, roughly 2 hours, $396. Electrical light switch R&R, remove and replace, half hour, $99. I'm just going through fence, 4x4 fence post, remove and replace, 2 hours, $396. So you guys kind of get the gist, right? Create a list of all the jobs you do. It's going to take some time, but seriously, this stuff pays off. Create a list of all the jobs you do and how long they take you to do it. Multiply it by what your hourly rate needs to be based on this equation found in the Handyman Pricing Handbook, and boom, shika boom, you got yourself a pricing list. All right, so that's kind of how we do our pricing list. That's pretty much all we got here for this pricing for profit. We went through a lot of great information here. I want to pinpoint that you can reach my great friend, Jason Call. To be honest, Jason Call is the best guy to do marketing. If you are interested in getting marketing for your handyman business, you definitely need it. Reach out to Jason at handymanmarketingpros.com. Seriously, not just the work that he does fantastic work, but his personality, his care that he has for his clients is just unmatched. So I highly recommend him. Reach out to Jason Call, Handyman Marketing Pros. He does websites, SEO, Google, all that stuff that I have no clue about, that most handymen don't have any clue about. He does it. Also, he's got contacts for logos and things like that. He's a fantastic guy. You can also schedule a time to talk with him for free at handymanmarketingpros.com. He's just a wealth of information. There's also a free download on his website. And you can also reach out to me at handymanjourney.com. I do business coaching. We have a bunch of courses. We have a group coaching platform that we would absolutely love to talk with you about. So that's how you can get a hold of us if you need to. Handymanjourney.com, handymanmarketingpros.com. And with that, is there any questions, any last questions before we call it a day here? We covered a lot of ground, a lot more than just pricing. This was a really fun webinar, and I would absolutely love to hear your questions here or your thoughts or opinions. So drop them in the chat right now.
Yeah, I've got one, and I just want to make, well, 2 comments, because we're going to be doing these webinars every single month, guys. We're going to cover hiring. We're going to do one. We're going to have multiple on marketing, Google, website, all the different things for marketing. Like Alan kind of went on a tangent about hiring, structuring as technicians. So we're going to keep doing these every month to kind of go in depth on these topics. So we're 100% open to your guys' feedback. As far as what topics you'd like more information about, because we do this day in, day out. Alan is day in, day out in his handyman business. So anyway, so please, we're totally open for feedback. Second, I want to shout out Edmundo. He put in the chat that his Amazon checkout with all 3 of your books, Alan. So
fantastic.
So he's on the right track. And like I said, Bezos makes most of the money there. Alan gets pennies. So it's truly a product of service. If you're selling a book on Amazon. So one question that was a little while ago that you'd already touched on, but Ivan was a little bit late, and he said, as a solo proprietor, what's the best way you pay yourself, and what do you leave in the company? And I did tell him to we'll send out the replay because you went through the pricing equation. But I guess if you could answer that like in a short summary, and then he'll get the replay to be able to recap.
Yeah. So as a sole proprietor, everything you make, at least from what I understand, I'm not a CPA. Understand that, right? So I literally hire people to do things that I don't understand. So I have a CPA. I do whatever she tells me to do. Same with Jason. He's my marketing guy. I do whatever he tells me to do because I have no clue. So as far as paying yourself as a sole proprietor, from what I understand, everything, every dime that you make as a sole proprietor is basically your money. So you're going to get taxed on it with self-employment tax no matter what. So whatever you make can go right into your account. You can just transfer that, and there's no issues there. Um, that's as far as I know about that, right? You just pay yourself. You just transfer it. Moving into like an LLC with an S corp, you actually have to be on W-2. You have to be a W-2 employee, pay yourself with a paycheck. But then you can also take what they call as owner draws and or owner distributions. So you get a W-2 paycheck as an LLC, but you can also take owner's distributions. You can just transfer money into your personal bank account at certain times that are appropriate in your business. But talk to a CPA by and large. Don't take my information to be, God or anything on that, because I'm definitely not a CPA.
Awesome. Edmundo asked if you could elaborate on how you incentivize techs.
Yeah, so I kind of went over it. Our technicians are paid based on an hour, right? So they get paid an hourly rate. Whether that's $19 an hour, $20 an hour, $21 an hour. And then they get incentivized based on billed hours. So again, there's a difference between clocked hours and billed hours. Everyone clocks 40 hours in a week if they're there Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30 or whatever. But not everyone bills 40 hours in a week. Some people bill 20 hours in a week. Some people bill 30 hours in a week. And again, that billed hour is how much they're actually making for the company. So you send them out to do a ceiling fan for an hour, that is one billed hour, right? If it takes them 2 hours to do that one hour ceiling fan that you sold for 1 hour, it still only counts as one billed hour, even though they have 2 clocked hours on that job. So basically they get incentivized on that. So the quicker that they work on those jobs, the more money they make. So if they bill 1 to 5 billed hours, they get an extra dollar an hour. If they bill 10.1 to 15 billed hours in a week, they get an extra $5 an hour, and it's so on. It's a matrix that continues to go all the way up to $15 an hour. I definitely have some more information on that. We'll definitely be diving into that more in different webinars. But that's kind of what I have for today. Good question.
Cool. Nick said 0 to 1 employee. Yeah, that's everyone's got to start there, man. Mm-hmm. So, yep, all part of the process.
Yeah, I think that's actually an interesting thought to think about as for mindset. Start thinking of yourself as an employee, because I think sometimes we think that, oh, we're just gonna plow through this because we're the boss, we're the owner, right? We don't actually make money. But no, think of yourself as an employee of this business. Like if you were working for anyone else, you would be expecting a certain paycheck. Don't cut your money just because you want to help people out. Because if you keep cutting your money, you're not going to be around to help people out anyways. So make yourself an employee.
Yep. One on this topic that I'm a big advocate of is a book called Profit First. I'm going to link that in the chat. This was, for me personally, I know a lot of other business owners, a game changer. It made you look at your finances differently. But it kind of speaks to the point of what Alan said, to separate yourself from, like, you're an employee of the business. And it's easier to start developing that mindset now when you're smaller, because as you get bigger, your expenses go up, your revenue goes up, but you've got to disassociate from the numbers, because you've got to know the numbers. But just because your business makes, say like $30,000 in a month, you're not taking that home. So really looking at your business as a separate entity, paying yourself, a paycheck, working on your profitability, and treating it as this separate entity. It's not yourself. Of course, you have a huge direction and influence over it, but don't be so closely tied where you think, like, I made $7,000 in revenue, so therefore why am I not able to pay myself $7,000? It right. is a business, it's its own animal. And so following these pricing suggestions that Alan has, the pricing handbook, definitely recommend Profit First is a good perspective on being able to pay yourself profit and baking that into your business. You kind of get better at navigating the financial side and the pricing of your business when you start to kind of look at it from that mindset. Which, if you came late to, Alan hit on pricing mindset on the earlier slide. So we'll send out the replay and he'll upload this to YouTube. But that's a big part of it, is just acknowledging that you're important. You have value. Someone is needing what you do that they cannot do themselves. And so it all works together, though, to ultimately with the goal of creating a profitable business.
Yep, fantastic. And it's funny, actually, yesterday or 2 days ago, we had a group coaching call in the Handyman Academy, our coaching program that we offer here at the Handyman Journey. And we talked about profit first and what that looks like for the handyman industry. And we really dove into it. And we talked a lot about this one, profit first for contractors. This is written by another guy other than Mike Michalowicz. I would recommend reading the first Profit First, the original one written by Mike Michalowicz, before you read this one, just because this one will make a whole lot more sense when you read the actual Profit First. So we'll put a link for both of those down in the comment section when this is on YouTube or down on the description. But I'm pretty excited about that, and interesting to hear you talk about that because we dove into that pretty in depth last or 2 nights ago on our coaching call and what that looks like. So that's fantastic. So thank you guys so much for tuning into this webinar. You guys have been fantastic. We really appreciate all that you guys do for the handyman industry. We are grateful that we could bring this information and this knowledge to you guys. Check us out on handymansuccess.net. Make sure you're registered there if you aren't already, so that you can get access to the upcoming webinars that are going to be happening every single month. And also check out the Handyman Success podcast. Reach out to Jason Call, Handyman Marketing Pros, and me at Handyman Journey. And we will catch you guys on the next episode of the Handyman Success webinar, which happens about the last Thursday of every single month. So thank you guys so much. Have a fantastic day.
Thanks for coming, everybody. See y'all.